I'll bet you watch that documentary, Untold Crimes and Penalties, you'll say, hey, best fucking doc I've ever seen.
I watched it, Pat. I obviously enjoyed it very much. Anything that involves a good family is a doc that I'm going to enjoy, especially in the garbage industry. It's basically Sopranos in real life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he's actually, I mean, that's how they lead off. This guy's the real life Tony Soprano. And then his kid's name's AJ. I've never seen The Sopranos, but his kid's name's AJ in there.
Bingo. Yep.
I mean, how do we not know this fucking existed? How is this happening right underneath our nose, especially up there in goddamn New England? I don't know, Connor. I don't know how you don't have 10 Trashers jerseys at this point.
Well, I mean, I wish I was around when Connecticut had such a high reputation during 2004 when the Danbury Trashers were crushing it, because since then, since they've fallen off, since the greatest GM of all time in all sports, AJ Galante, has left, it hasn't been the same ever since, Pat. I wish I knew. I wish I did. I didn't.
He didn't leave. Okay, his dad went to jail. The FBI.
Yeah, but that's when he said, you know what? I'm done with hockey. I can't do it anymore. I can't be a president. I can't be a GM. I'm putting my cards on the table and I'm going into boxing. What a weapon!
Well, he didn't actually go into boxing immediately, but I understand what you were saying.
Those 10 years as a driver, you know, he was just, okay, how am I going to start this boxing business? And then he just bided his time. And then here we are. He's promoting, I think he has a massive undercard fight he's doing coming up, too.
You're giving away behind-the-scenes stuff on the show, which is kind of classic.
I Googled
Connor.
him. Hey, I Googled him. I just saw what he was doing.
Yeah, you Googled that, huh? The information that we were sent directly behind the scenes. This is classic Boston Connor. I'll just air out all the grievances that we hear behind the scenes on the air live. Very nice of you.
Pat, I have a behind-the-air grievance to air out live. Everyone in the office absolutely loved the documentary, said it was the best documentary of all time, except for this stooge right here.
I never said that. That never happened.
Why didn't you like it?
No, I loved it, and I literally told these guys, Zito and Nick, that I absolutely loved it.
He was
like
mad that I
said it was one of the best docs I've seen in a very long time. But Zito came storming in and said top 10 doc of all time, and I said there's been a lot of
100%.
documentaries out there. Z, just hold the horses.
And I told him to name 10. He couldn't.
Well, yeah,
I agree. Okay, obviously, I agree on the top 10 doc of all time.
Yeah.
By the way. Anytime you can get John Gotti to John fucking Cena.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
it was really good. Don't get me wrong.
And it was just every 10 minutes, it seemed like it was getting better somehow. It was like, how can this story be more absurd?
Just kept one-upping every time. It was crazy.
Well, and
it never ended. I have no idea how it continued. I saw Triple H sitting at this kid's birthday party at the Rock, and I was like, are you fucking kidding? I actually texted Mr. H. I was like, do you remember going to AJ Galante's birthday party? And he sent me back. He sent me back a question mark, you know, and I was like, I think you're about to hear about this. I mean, you're a pretty big part of this entire documentary, Mr. H.
That's awesome, dude. You should send him a screenshot of him at this party. He probably has no idea.
Well, I think he's going to recall it quickly, but what were you going to say, Tom?
Well, I was just like, lately with Netflix especially, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is like, okay, you could trim a lot of fat here. Like, it was the perfect amount of time. There was no wasted time in terms of like telling the story. Like, and that is something where it's like, oh shit, I almost wish this would have been a 6-parter.
Yeah, me too. The fact that it was only an hour and 27 minutes or whatever was disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was disappointed in that. And by the way, we just... You know, it seems like we're never happy with anything, but this thing we are happy.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I think everybody should check it out. I think we got a chance to maybe even get, you know, the greatest boxing promoter and hockey GM of our time, AJ Galante, on the show.
Whoa. Come on.
We'll talk to him. And I would like to potentially get Jimmy Galante in our corner, by the way. So, you know, as we go into these negotiations with these big banks, I'm excited to hear. Imagine if Jimmy's sitting right behind me. You know, I don't know if you know this guy, Jimmy Galante. Ever heard of him? He went to jail. He's clean, obviously, but I think there's some old habits that might die hard. You know. All right, let's go. Did you know the Galante family existed? You Italians? No way, right?
No.
No, I wish. I'd have been up there in section 102 going wild with the crowd.
Bro, so many people haven't watched this doc yet, and this is a terrible show, because the show is supposed to be like, hey, we're supposed to talk about things everybody knows about, but we're 8 days away from actual football. Nothing really matters yet. Nope. We're kind of sitting here holding our dicks, and it's like this fucking documentary. This documentary happened. It's the greatest thing I've seen in some time. It's come at the perfect time. That doc. How often did you think about the Danbury Trashers before you filmed that doc? Did you look back on that time in your life and say that was the most insane time forever? This needs to be a documentary. I didn't even know it existed. What a time for you, I bet, to be alive, Rupper.
Yeah, no, it was nuts because one of the things as far as the timeline of it. So I played in their first season, right, and in their second season, and after that season was the last season when things kind of went down. I wasn't on the team then, but I had some buddies. That was some of the greatest. I mean, I have such great memories of playing there. We all got treated like gold, and it was great because us guys would go out after a game, we'd have some beers, and just shooting stories and experiences, right? The things that we were seeing and experiencing. It was incredible, and those guys I stayed in contact with, and they would tell me some of these things that were happening, and then it kind of everything just went quiet for a real long time. And I think it was ESPN magazine a number of years ago came out and they wanted to do a story about it, but I didn't really know anybody else that was contributing to it. So I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm just going to keep playing hockey and whatever. So when we found out that the Galante family was going to be involved in this and AJ was, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I thought they did a hell of a job, man. I thought it was really fun. I learned a lot watching it as well, but it was a crazy, crazy time there in Denver.
So let's talk about the smart decision you made not to talk about a mafia situation without, a heads up or an okay from the mafia firm. That's smart. Rupper, that's a very smart thing. And AJ's a big fan of yours. He has not seen the doc yet. He's going to watch it tonight. So he might sound a little ignorant to this entire thing. But whenever I was growing up in Pittsburgh, okay, we have too many Italians. All right, I have friends, too many Italians where I was growing up at, DeGiulio, Moraldo. But whenever you would walk into a situation, me as a kid, there was a couple times I walk in, I'm like, oh, okay, so there's some shit going on here. Okay, like there was a bathroom maybe that I was in during a wedding for one of my friends. I was like, okay, probably not supposed to be in a stall hearing what's going on here. Did you guys know that there was potential full-on mafia stuff going on around you? Did you get the sense like, hey, this feels like something much larger is happening? Or did you guys just say, this is the coolest experience of all time? There's this guy who wants us to fight people. He's paying us bonuses in cash. His kid is a fucking legend. They're giving us everything we want. Or was there conversations like, it feels like there's something maybe happening here that's bigger than what we can see? Did that happen?
We're there to play hockey. That's what we knew. The hockey was surely different. I mean, we're out there, and I think one of the things you notice is you'd sit there and you had, AJ and Jimmy, his father, were up in their box for games, and guys would say, "Hey, Rupper, wait till you see this." Like during the games, we had such a tough team. I mean, there was guys that I could talk to you guys for hours about the build of this team, and AJ did an unbelievable job with it as far as like put together like a really good team, but a tough team. I mean, we had players who, for the fans that are watching that aren't hockey fans per se, there's like an underground fight club in the minor leagues over the years, and we had those guys, and they all had nicknames. There was Brad the Wingnut.
Winger.
Yeah, and then we had Frank the Animal Bialois. We had John Nasty Marasti. I mean,
the Nigerian Nightmare.
We had Roman, the Nigerian Nightmare, Nadur. I mean, these are real things. And if you talk to anybody that's played the game, it's like this minor league heavyweight underground following for these guys. And what would end up happening is when things would go against our team or teams would come in and they do something. One of the stories was, excuse me, Steve Levy with ESPN and Barry Melrose, they owned the Adirondack team. And all the games were getting out of control. And I guess Barry made a comment once, and I talked to Barry about this because I've worked with him since, and we just laugh about it over a beer. It's great. But he made a comment like, this team's being run by Tony Soprano. Jimmy Galante didn't like that, and so what he ended up saying, he was very clear, we're going to let this guy know every time we play that you're not going to talk about us like that. So what ended up happening is, like, I didn't play every game, so my setup was I only had to play 10 games to play in the playoffs. So I was living at home, in Western PA, and I would just come in and play games. And that was kind of part of it too. I'd come in and they'd be like, yeah, we're going to give you a car. What do you want, the Escalade or you want the Ferrari? I'm like, I'll take the Escalade. It's February, and I never drove a Ferrari before in Connecticut. So anyways, I ended up going in there and whatever. So we would have this stretch where, you just, we would play these, I didn't see everything, I guess is my point. So when we would sit there and we'd go out and we'd have some beers and we were talking, guys would just be like, oh my gosh, hey man, listen to this. Last road trip we were driving and all of a sudden we're on the bus. It's minor leagues, you're on the bus, right? And all of a sudden you hear the psh, lights go on and they're just picking up some dude at a truck stop. And guys are like waking up and they're like looking and they're like, is that Frank Bialois? The animal? And they're just picking up these guys. Guys didn't know, and they suit them up for one game, and those guys would go and they play. They get 2-3 fights, get kicked out. Sometimes they get expelled from the league in all. And it was crazy. I mean, it was modern slap shot what we were seeing. It was nuts.
The UHL commissioner is a big part of this documentary. And whenever he was early in the doc, and there's a little bit of a babyface turn for him, I don't want to spoil anything, but early he was talking to AJ or whatever. And he's like, hey, listen, 2 fights, 3 fights is fine. 8 fights in one game. That's what these things, AJ, first game in the Danbury Trashers Arena or whatever, first game for this team's existence. Wenger, the guy he's talking about, this guy, legend, he's Gumpy and AQ Shipley put into one person, by the way. I love this guy. He said literally, Jimmy Galante, in the doc, you'll see this, before the thing starts, calls him on his cell phone. Somebody gives him a cell phone. This is as like the national anthem's happening or whatever. And he answers it and he looks up at Jimmy and Jimmy's like, hey, as soon as this puck's dropped, fucking go ahead and let it eat, kid. So this is the first game of the season, first game of the franchise's existence. They are already getting into beef with this commissioner because the commissioner knows all hell's about to break loose. And before there is even a touch of the puck with a stick, there's already 2 brawls happening for this Trashers team. And the way it was displayed in the doc was just beautiful. Watching it back for you, Rupp, it had to feel good that Jimmy told his kid, hey, get me a fucking goal scorer, and then walks out. And his first thought was like, Mike fucking Rupp. I need Mike Rupp on the team. That had to feel pretty good that a Mafia family's first thought whenever they scored some goals, as opposed to just fight people, was you. That had to feel pretty good.
Well, it's funny because obviously I wasn't a big goal scorer in the NHL, so but at that time. But you got to think though, that's kind of the coolness, and you mentioned it before. Like everything's crazy; it blows your mind how things line up, things that come out. I mean, the thing I was learning from the documentary, even I don't want to tip everything else, is like one of the wiretaps was on the mascot Scrappy. You know what I mean? So the mascot is kind of how they got. It's just nuts. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But I think that's the crazy part is this. So AJ was a New Jersey Devils fan, right? So he was at Game 7 in 2003 Stanley Cup Finals, and that was the best game of my life. And so he saw that. So in his head, it was etched that I'm a big game player. I'll take it because I wasn't, for the rest of my career pretty much, but. It felt good. I got one story I wanted to share with you guys real quick. This is what's hilarious. It didn't make it in the doc there. I mean, like I said, there's so many hockey stories we could tell for hours. But so I had to, like I said, get in 10 games to qualify for the playoff roster. So I would look on the schedule and I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna go a weekend on, a weekend off. So I would fly to wherever they were. And I'd meet the team. So there's a stretch where there's 3 games, 3 nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 games. And it was up in Michigan. So I'm like, this is a good way I could bang out 3 games real quick. So I went up there, and the next week was when the team was having the first game against the Adirondack team. Remember, that's the Barry Melrose, Steve Levy team. They called him, he's being run by Tony Soprano, or kind of, they felt poking fun at them. And that was a weekend I was not scheduled to play. So we're traveling after the one game across Michigan. It's probably 1 a.m. I'm sleeping on the bus, right? So I got my head against the window. My head's back on the seat. The player behind me is leaning forward on his cell phone. So he's talking like basically in my ear, but he's trying to be quiet. Now I'm hearing one side of the conversation. And I'm hearing he says Wags, which ends up being this Wagner kid who was a guy who was banned from some leagues, and he hasn't played hockey in a few years. I knew that about him. But he's like, all I hear is Wags. He goes, Wags, we got this game against Barry Melrose's team. He's been talking a lot of shit. We're going to send a message. Can you play? Can you play next weekend? And I hear him, he goes, listen, man, I don't give a shit. I know you're running the hunting cabin. He's out in Western Canada. He goes, they don't give a fuck if you can skate. They don't care. They want you to come in here. You got to come in here, and we got to send a message. And I'm hearing this conversation. I'm like, what is going on right now? So the next week, I'm getting ready to go, and I say to the boys before I leave, I go, hey, let me know what happens next weekend. My phone's blowing up, and it starts a brawl. This Wagner is on the ice. He climbs in the other team's bench, grabs the coach by his suit, and starts fighting. He gets banned from life. And that was the stuff I talked to Barry about. Like, it was crazy, man. It's crazy hockey. It's stuff you wouldn't believe if you heard.